film. Det er mit faste job. Så det er der ved siden af film. Velkildet styrelsesspil, så jeg har lavet lidt godt arbejde på at lave dem. Jeg kan til spil på bordet. Det er dejligt.
Jo,
Det skal man ikke undervurdere.
skulle lyden gerne være op og køre det her højt.
Twitter, hvad jeg har sat.
Nu laver vi lige lydtest over nettet, bare for at vi laver lige lydtest over nettet, så det er vi livestreamer. Vi snakker om privat, så må jeg måske lige tænke jer lidt op i dem og slet. Yes.
Ja, og vi skal også lige have nogle info, ikke, med toiletter og internet.
Yes.
Okay.
Fik du info?
2, 3. Den styrer niveauet på alle mikrofonerne. Så det 1, 2, 3. Ja, kan du høre, hvad jeg siger? Ellers skal du lige tænde for et eller andet.
Hello everybody, welcome to Crowd 15. My name is Thomas and I'm going to be the Toastmaster for the day, guiding you through the whole day. I'm trying to be as invisible as possible because it's the speakers who are starting today, of course. Just really few practical things. The toilets are out here, and there are actually toilets on each floor, so if this one is occupied, just go down one floor and then take care of business. Do not go out there, there's no toilets. The Twitter hashtag is IWDK, that's the primary, or you can also use hashtag Crowd15 if you want to do that. That's like the secondary hashtag for the whole day. And Wi-Fi is a bit tricky because you need to go on the VIA guest network and then go SMS and then punch in your mobile number, and then you'll actually get a code by SMS. That's what you have to do if you want to go on Wi-Fi. I think that's it for me right now. Actually, we are starting with the last speaker first. We are changing a bit the program because Tatudu had to cancel yesterday, I think, Diana. So we're actually starting with Ryan Wood, developer evangelist from startup.co and Fundable as well. So we're really looking forward to that. You had like a really, really tough journey here to Aarhus, I hear that. Okay, cool. Should we give a warm welcome? Ryan Wood.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I hope you all had an easier time getting to Aarhus than I did. It was one of my more interesting travel adventures of late, but let's not focus too much on that. So as we said, there was a bit of a change in the order, so I wasn't planning on delivering the keynote, but since I did, I stayed up last night, was already sleep deprived, so I decided let's push a little further. With 36 hours without sleep, let's redesign this thing so it's a little more general. And so without further ado, crowded, and it's supposed to look like that, guys, so it's very intentional. So, new worlds, new rules. So much has changed in the way that you can approach the crowd at this point. The power of the internet has given us the ability to reach further into more crowds, further define crowds, and be able to reach populations that we never could before. Imagine in the way that modern transportation has allowed us to get anywhere relatively easily, relatively quickly, except for Aarhus. The internet has made it so that we actually don't have to go to those places. We can reach people in ways that we could never do before, which is really exciting. With new opportunities become new challenges. Visibility is higher than it ever was before, meaning that people can see what you're doing, maybe even sometimes before you want them to know. If you're familiar with Product Hunt, anybody? Product Hunt? There's this phenomenon happening now where people are getting pushed onto Product Hunt and being discovered before they want to. So they're saying, we want to build up for a launch, we want to have everything ready to go on Product Hunt, we want to make a big splash in the market, and then somebody calls them like, hey, we saw you in Product Hunt today. And they're going, that's not what we wanted at all, right? So now people are looking at what is maybe a beta of your product. So you have to be mindful that the crowd is watching all the time. Consumers are gone, right? People are empowered. They want to be involved in what you're doing in a different way than they ever have before, right? They're engaged in the story. They're interested in what you're doing. They want to be part of the progress, and it's important to engage them at that level. There's been a power shift between big brands and small brands and people like us who want to start something new. People like the story that we tell, right? Coke can get out and do advertising. They can reach millions and billions of people, but we have a way to touch people that they don't. We can connect with them on a very different level. They can connect with us on a very different level, right? What can I do to help Coke? I don't know, I could probably gain a couple pounds and, diabetes, something, but what can you do to help me, or what can I do to help you? At the startup level is very different, right? I could be significantly involved in your trajectory and helping you tell your story. Old power, new power. I have a little less time than I thought today. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. There's a great TED Talk on this by my friend Jeremy Hymans, and he and Henry Timms put this piece in Harvard Business Review back in the December issue, if anybody reads. Really nice piece about the shift in power, and it's, again, reinforces this point about being an empowered consumer. Giving. So there's all this power out there, right? Everybody wants access to this power, and so you're all here because I assume that you want to harness the power of the crowd for yourselves in some way. Show of hands, how many people are either working on a startup or want to be? What the hell are the rest of you doing? Okay. So, before we talk about the power, and I don't want to start on a negative note with this because I want to bring energy to this room. I want everybody to feel happy about starting something, even though the vast majority of you aren't. I need to tell you a story about Fred. You may know Fred. Some of you may be familiar with him. He's fairly well known, sadly, for a massive, massive failure. Okay, Fred neglected to understand where he was in relation to his own environment. Fred didn't understand the resource limitations that he had. He didn't understand his own power and his own capability to carry his idea forward. He didn't properly set his objectives, and I just looked at this graphic at 2:30 in the morning last night. This is supposed to represent success, and this is a Ferris wheel, so it's just sort of going around and around. He doesn't really know where to get off the success train. He didn't clearly think through what would happen at the end of this whole thing. So 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, it's a failure. That's Fred. Poor Fred. Right? So make sure that you understand your environment. Make sure that you properly understand your resources and limitations. Make sure that you plan for success in a way that will actually get you something you want to achieve. I don't know if any of you noticed. We can go back. Even if Fred accomplishes what he's trying to do here, he's just going to be on a bathroom counter. That's not going to buy anything for Fred, right? If this was the kitchen, there was a big... What have I done? Never mind. We're back. Okay. Starting a business is hard. It's really hard. How many of you have already started a business? Was it hard? Keep your hands up if it was hard. Some of you that didn't even start a business said it was hard. I like that. So we all know, right? So it is. It's challenging. 50 million. This is the number that we estimate based on our own research from the Kauffman Foundation, the number of ideas roughly floating around at any given time in the world that want to become a business, right? It doesn't account for everything. If there's somebody standing in, I don't know, Phuket, Thailand, thinking I want to start a roadside fruit stand, it's not accounted for in this number. We're thinking about things that have online scalability, even not online, but maybe new Main Street, where people are actually using modern methods, social media and so forth, to get the word out about their businesses. 6 million is a hard to validate number, but this is roughly the number of businesses that we think launch in the US on an annual basis. It combines things like social media launch and also company registrations. This is a pretty dubious number because a lot of those are empty holding companies, LLCs that get formed to do things like transfer tax liability for kids' inheritance or something. But the point is, there's a lot of ideas, there's less businesses starting, and we all know that somewhere between 97 and 99% of these will fail in the first 5 years, right? So it's really, really damn hard to start a business. But reasonably so, right? It should be hard to start a business. If you have the expectation that you're going to grow something that's going to help hundreds or thousands, millions of people, and make you potentially millions of dollars, there needs to be an investment made in this, right? And it should be hard. Anybody have any idea what these two numbers represent? What can we achieve with this amount of money? Sadly, I pulled the color out of this. Does anybody know what that is? It's supposed to be red berries and cream. Okay, and so that dollar amount and that number of days, that's how long it took me, and that's the amount of money I spent on my Danish tutor to learn not to say Rod, God, and Flod, to say right? So that's still probably not there, but that's how long it took me. I'm just kidding. So what that actually buys you, 1,500 days and $120,000, is the average time to complete and the average cost of a private college education in the United States. And for that trouble, you'll get a $45,000 a year job, right? So in that context, starting a business should be hard, right? I think it's worth the investment. I don't know, how many of you have graduated from university? How many of you still plan on graduating from university? Based on the fact that you get paid to go to university, or how many of you plan to stay there forever? Nobody? Good. All right. So, 4 years. For the last 4 years, we've been trying to tackle the problem around what makes it so hard to start a business. What's the one single factor that we could eliminate that would make it easier for everybody to start a company? Let me talk a little bit, just for a minute. This isn't a plug about us, but I want you to have some context for who we are and what we do. So, I'm the Chief Content Officer of Startups.co, and prior to that, I built out our entire consulting division where we work with thousands of startups on an annual basis, working with them for anything from creating landing pages, launch strategy, writing business plans, doing funding plans, helping them execute on their crowd funds. And so, a lot of hands-on time in the last 4 years in the trenches with startups every day, getting our sleeves rolled up, getting our hands dirty. The properties that we operate are BizPlan, Clarity, Fundable, Killer Startups, and LaunchRock. In order, BizPlan obviously helps you to write a business plan, and it's a great tool for kind of getting your feet wet, doing the ideation process. Clarity is an expert network of around 5,000 people you can reach out to at any time to get access to help that you need that's very specific to the problem that you're trying to tackle. One of the things that we realized was that you may have all kinds of questions, but you end up stuck in your parochial system. If I'm in Arvus and I have a question about social media and I want to market a product to millennials, I'm stuck talking to whoever knows the most about that in the city in most cases, where I have to try to stalk somebody on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's not efficient, it doesn't work well. So we created Clarity so you can pick up a phone and talk to somebody. Fundable is crowdfunding. We do both equity and rewards. So we have a lot of experience in that. If you have questions around those things specifically, I have answers to a lot of stuff and it can at least help you with an idea on what you're doing there. Killer Startups is media. LaunchRock is the largest landing page startup community in the world. We've gathered something like 16 million backers for the companies that have started there and launched hundreds of thousands of businesses. We get 24 million annual visits. 12 million of those people either back or follow a startup within our network, which is a meaningful number, right? So the crowd is growing and growing and growing. The beauty of that is because we've created a network behind it, we can transfer that power from startup to startup. There's an aggregate community of people who are looking at these things, and so you can start to build a crowd around interest in being early adopters, interest in startups. And so these communities are starting to form. We're not the only one, but these are the kind of things that you need to look into and try to tap into as you start to grow your own businesses. 600,000 startups have engaged us in some meaningful way, either signing up and using one of our services or coming through our consulting, and this is actually about an 8-year period. Okay, 15,000 registrations a month, not that really matters. We've raised $150 million in startup funding via Fundable, and that number is not accurate. Actually, the last couple of days we've closed a few more rounds. So back to the question I've been trying to answer. What's the single roadblock that people face in trying to start a business? And what we figured out was that the answer is simple, but it's not singular, right? It's not a single problem for everybody that's trying to start a company. It's simple though, and it's the very next step. Most people struggle with understanding exactly what to do next, right? It's not the long view that you have trouble with. You understand where you want to take your business. But given the extreme resource constraints that most small businesses or startups have, you have to know what to do next. If you screw up what comes next, the dominoes start to fall in the wrong direction. You may not be able to make it to the next step. Right, so keep an eye on what you're doing. Ask anybody who's done this at a competitive level which hurdle they're focused on. It's the first one. Not that the rest of them don't matter. You've got to clear them all, but you have to clear them in order. And if you don't make that one, it doesn't matter, right? It's irrelevant at that point. So we're going to talk about this process of starting a company in 5 stages. And we're really only going to focus on 3. But ideation comes first. I assume that most of you, if you're thinking about starting a company, you probably already have the idea. So we're not going to spend a lot of time about how the crowd can engage there. We are going to spend some time talking about how you use the crowd to validate your idea, okay? Because that is really, really important. I see a lot of people spend a lot of time on the lab bench, in their office, doing whatever it is that they do to come up with their idea, and then they continue to iterate on it without getting it out into the public view, and it doesn't go anywhere, so we'll talk about that. Traction, so once you validated your idea, how do you carry it forward? How do you take this thing from being an idea that you understand that people care about into something that actually lives and breathes in the market? Funding, obviously very important, and this can come in many forms. It can be in the form of bootstrapping, it could be personal savings, cashing in, picking up an extra college degree just for the money. Whatever it is you need to do, could be crowdfunding, could be angel or VC. I don't know how active the angel and VC market is in Denmark. High, medium, low? Low as in close to 0, or just, yeah, that's, unfortunately, when you look at the proportions, that's true in almost every market you go to. You can say that, well, the US has the most vibrant startup economy and funding sources in the world, but we also have a disproportionately large number of startups. So the number of checks versus the number of recipients is roughly the same. And then sourcing or growth. So this is things that you can do using the crowd to make it easier to scale your company, acquire more users, do the things that happen kind of after you start. So we're going to focus on validation, traction, and funding. I didn't look at what time we started. How am I doing?
10 minutes, 20 minutes, sorry, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. We're in 20 minutes, or I'm...
Left.
I have left. All right, good. We're doing fine. Okay, so the power is in the purpose, and I sort of gave this away a little bit at the beginning, but the real power in tapping into the crowd, no matter what it is you're trying to accomplish, is to be able to connect with them at a meaningful level, something that's meaningful to them. So many people look at the crowd and they go, if only I could get my idea in front of 1 million people, enough people would like it, that we would have success. That might be true, but if you think about it the other way around, you think about what can I do to help the first person that sees this? What is the value that they're going to get out of this? How will they feel engaged in my story? How can I give them purpose and role in this entire thing? Really interesting stuff starts to happen. We'll tell some stories about it later. So validation. Your idea probably looks like this in your head, right? It's got teeth, it can go out and can kill in the market, and you spend all your time thinking about this thing. So you know the ins and the outs, the intricacies, and what really makes it special. Likelihood is this is how the rest of the world sees it, right? It's still something. You wouldn't want to mess with it necessarily. You wouldn't want to let it jump off your toilet, but it's not likely how you want the world to see your idea, right? So make sure that you go out and validate what other people think about what you're doing prior to really getting into market. There's a lot of ways you can do this. don't let your perspective get in the way of vision, right? It's really important to get outside your lab bench, get outside your office, and get perspective from people other than yourself. The some relevant hashtag was supposed to be actually some relevant hashtag, but I added that at 2:30 last night, so you guys can come up with your own relevant hashtag. A few ways to validate. Forums. When I say forums, I mean any place where conversation's happening online. And there's really two ways to do this. There's passive and active validation. You can validate the problem that you're trying to solve with your startup by looking into the forums, finding out where people are talking about the problem that you're attempting to solve, or talking about other solutions that you're attempting to displace. Right? So you do a lot of passive research, you can do secondary research and desk research, and understand how this is being solved now, and start to validate, yeah, there is a market for this, because there's a lot of cases where we see people out building a solution and then going and looking for a problem, and it's usually an early death for a company, right? Anybody familiar with what a Yeti is? The abominable snowman? We see a lot of people trying to build the better Yeti trap, and there's no reason, right? There's just no purpose for that. So use the forums for both primary and secondary research. Start conversations there. They're also a great way to attract people who you can use in later stages of traction, bring them back in, and have them actually start to take part in what you're doing. This is a great time to get people involved, because if they're involved in the origin of your story, they're going to be that much more bought into what you're doing throughout the process. Landing pages. Everybody familiar with the landing pages? Squeeze page, marketing page. This could take a lot of different forms. It could be a sign-up page via Facebook, or it could just be a marketing message on Facebook with a like button. What you're trying to do is test your messaging. So you want to get your message about what your startup is specifically out there, or some question you have about your product, and then see if you can get enough validation for that, right? Can I capture email addresses? If I tell people I'm launching a new service that will drive Ryan from Copenhagen to Aarhus and he can just sleep the whole way, can we validate that one person will use that? We could. One person will definitely use that. Can we get anybody else to do that, right? So we want to ask these questions early on to make sure there's actually a market for this. So you can create a simple website where people just opt in, or you can even make it look like you can buy something. When you get to the other side of the landing page, doesn't need to be anything there. You can tell them, thanks, we're in beta, we'll let you know when it's ready. You just want to see if you can get people to take some action against your idea. Crowdfunding. You can use crowdfunding at the validation stage. It's not my favorite use of crowdfunding, and I'll tell you, at this stage, it's really not about the money that you raise. It's about finding out whether people care enough about what you're trying to do to push the buy button. So you could also do the same thing with just a pre-sale campaign. The difference with crowdfunding is you have a different ability to sell the story. When you're pre-selling, you're really just trying to push a product. When you're crowdfunding at this stage, you can really tell a story and see if people get involved. So it is a way to validate an idea, not my favorite use of crowdfunding. So let me tell you a little story. We worked with a company named Staples. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with them. They're a couple $1 billion company, big office supply company in the US, probably number 1 or 2, couple $1 billion company. They needed to be more innovative. They wanted to be able to find startup companies that would go on their shelves before somebody else discovered them. They wanted to have exclusive rights to these folks. So we ran a contest with them where we ended up getting 63,000 people backing and buying these products in a pre-sale campaign and social voting competition. And 4 companies end up getting winning in the contest. Actually, 8 companies end up getting funded by Staples and going online with them, and they're actually in their retail shelves now. For any of you who have a retail product or trying to have a retail product, you'll understand how hard it is to move from concept or lab bench onto a retail shelf. So this is really powerful stuff to be able to go from my garage operation. Sorry, guys. To getting on a major retailer shelf. And these are the companies that got there. And the other thing that's really interesting when you see stuff like this is you can start to get an idea of what trends are working in the market. So Staples was able to say, let's put this out there and see, what do consumers actually want to buy, and let's use that as a leading indicator for what we should have on our shelves. And so they found out that home automation via Eva, which is a lighting solution, and Plum, which you can barely see up there, also home automation, were huge. In-hand and plug radio fell a little bit outside of that, but plug radio is also semi-home automation. It's a little radio you can kind of plug into anywhere. It hooks into your Wi-Fi, gives you access to music wherever you want in the house. Kind of cool. In-hand is just a stand for an iPad. Okay, so let's talk traction. I want to keep moving so we don't have a ton of time. BYOC. Anybody know what BYOB is? I did not do a good job tailoring this to my mindset. Bring your own beer. This is well, okay, bring your choice. So this is bring your own crowd. BYOB is a concept we have in the US where if you want to have a party and you don't want to foot the bill for the entire thing, you tell people to bring your own beer. Right? So if you bring your own beer, you can show up. So bring your own crowd indicates that in order to access the crowd in a meaningful way, one of the things you typically need to do is bring your own crowd. You have to develop some critical mass amongst the core population of users and then use that as access to the crowd. So you don't need to own the entire crowd. You need to have access to enough nodes and entry points via social, via email lists, via partner products, things that are complementary to your service that allow you access to the greater crowd. Not gonna run, huh? That's a pity. Okay, so I guess you guys can probably imagine what happens here, right? Nice try, though. Okay, so what ends up happening here, we could recreate it if you guys want. So what he does, this guy doesn't validate his crowd first, right? He didn't gather enough critical mass within his core user population. He runs up to the front of the crowd and tries to stage dive. And the crowd steps aside, right? So don't do that with your business launch. A few ways to gain traction. Again, landing pages are great here. If you've already done a good job of building up that validation population, you can reach back out to those folks and engage them via landing pages, via squeeze pages, or social campaigns. The difference between the validation and the traction stage is at this point what you're trying to do is a more specific call to action. So there's going to be some activity that you want them to really back and become part of, right? So I want to turn them from being passive but interested users into actual actors, right? So it may be come back my crowdfunding campaign. It might be download our app or pre-download the app. Take some other meaningful action on the part of the startup. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. It could be attend an event like this. Media at the traction stage becomes really important. If you can garner it, it's harder and harder to get the media's attention with business launches, unless you're doing something really interesting or really weird or really disruptive. And let's be honest, like most of us start businesses that just aren't that weird or interesting or disruptive. It's just the way it goes, right? We have good ideas, they're just not all that different. But media outreach is really important, right? Tap into the blogger space, go for major media, try to tie into current events, and really use that to gain an early audience. It can make or break startup companies. There's something called the TechCrunch effect. Anybody a TechCrunch reader? It's a pretty popular tech blog in the US, one of the most popular. They track a lot of funding, they do that kind of stuff. But the TechCrunch effect indicates that if you get an article on TechCrunch at the right time, it can drive hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views over time via the shares. It's a big deal. Rented land. So in addition to major media, you can work with a lot of smaller folks. So complementary startups, startup groups in your area, bloggers who don't necessarily have a major name but have a good following, particularly if the core audience is really well aligned with what you're doing. And you can build on their audience, right? So you can borrow their people and make them into yours. And you can do this in a couple ways. You can guest post on their site if you've got an interesting point of view or perspective. You can have them guest post on your blog if you've already got one. Or they can actually write something about you on their site. Obviously, in ease of appearance, I went out of order. You writing on there is the easiest. Getting them to guest post on yours is slightly easier. Or 5 minutes now. Stop. Go no further. Okay. Crowdfunding is a signal. So at the traction phase, crowdfunding becomes a little more important than validation. But there's still something that happens here that I still don't think that traction is the ideal place for crowdfunding. I think funding is the ideal place for crowdfunding. But if you want to engage in crowdfunding earlier than that, or you need to, before you've really gained full traction in the market, it has a couple useful features. It can generate a little bit of cash, it can generate a little bit of momentum. The real thing you're doing is signaling. Everybody here is probably familiar with Kickstarter, right? So we experience something we call the Kickstarter problem all the time. We actually like the Kickstarter problem because we tend to be the solution for it. What happens when you go out and do a really large crowdfund, or even not a really large crowdfund? You're working uphill the entire time. You're probably at your least efficient cost of manufacturing, your least efficient cost of distribution. Everything takes longer, costs more, right? So you're going to push these products out of the market. A bunch of people are going to buy them. You're going to get some money in. You probably didn't calculate your production costs correctly. Your margins are either going to be razor thin, zero, or in a lot of cases negative. And so you may generate a bunch of demand and interest in the product. The cash you generate will typically be burnt just to hand the people the product. So now, what will typically take a full 9-month cycle later, you're back where you started, but with some traction. And so one of the things that we see people do is leverage that traction into an equity raise of some sort. Or particularly in smaller markets like this, maybe it just leverages you into a partnership or a purchase order with a retailer or something along those lines. But it can be really powerful, right? So you can use crowdfunding to signal. Trying to use rewards-based funding at the traction phase to actually generate cash for your company in the OpEx sense, really, really tough, really tough. Very few people have executed on it. Delaney Barbecue, so these guys did a really cool job of gaining traction before their launch using social media. They had also validated through social media. They're a nice case study in total. They're a barbecue joint. They wanted to open in Brooklyn, and there wasn't anything like this, and they wanted to go for a very specific Southern-style barbecue experience, and they wanted to make sure that people actually liked it. So they validated their idea, and they got enough support that they felt like there's a market for this, so let's go ahead and launch it. They had very little cash to do this, and so when they launched, they knew that they needed to be as efficient as they could. They needed to drive business from an early stage. They didn't have a bunch of money to sit on and sort of grow the business over time. So they used the same folks that they used to Validate to drive a social media campaign, gathered a whole bunch of users by offering them a chance to skip the line on opening day. If you ever open a restaurant, which I have, there isn't usually a line on opening day. So it was an interesting tactic, but they ended up with a line around the block. There's photos of it. I didn't put one in. I should have. They had something like 1,500 people in line on the first day. And the first couple of days, they sold some ridiculous, either 6,000, which doesn't sound like enough, or 60,000, which sounds like too many, pounds of ribs in the first few days of being open. So really nice execution, gather the users, give them a specific purpose, and then have them share it to drive success. And the story was, do you want this in your neighborhood, right? Do you want to be able to walk to one of these places? Do you want Brooklyn to become more like Manhattan, more like some of the other boroughs where you have access to these things? And the answer was yes. Right? Funding, what are we down to, about 2 minutes? All right, here we go. Funding comes in all shapes and sizes. We already sort of talked about it at the top. It can be bootstrap, it can be crowdfunding, it can be angel investment. So don't really worry about that too much. Let the punishment fit the crime. Guys, raising funding is punishing. It's one of the worst things that you can go through as a business. Show of hands, who's raised funds? Was it awesome? I don't mean getting the check, I mean the process of getting to the check. Was it bad? You seem pretty okay about it. All right, I want to hear your story then. So, one of the things that I always try to convince people of is to reduce the amount of funding that you need to raise, or eliminate it at all, if possible. It's not always possible, and this sounds funny coming from a guy who runs a crowdfunding site, right? I'm one of the founders. I directly benefit when people decide to do crowdfunding, and yet we always try to reduce the need for capital. Why? Because we're entrepreneurs first, and we are firmly in the camp of the startups, and when you raise funds, you open up to all sorts of other things. You end up with other people in your cap table. You give up a percentage of your company. You may develop a runway now, whereas before you might have been bootstrapping and saying, I can just cover this out of cash flow, I've got enough extra money every month to kind of keep this thing limping along. You take on funding, all of a sudden, you've got a runway, because you're going to start spending money that you don't really have, it's not coming in, and at some point that money goes to zero, meaning you can no longer pay your developers, make rent, whatever it is. It has a finite stop date, and I can tell you that a deadline like nothing else changes the way you think, right? And so in terms of the decisions you're making for your startup, the minute you do that, and you've now got a timer and you're watching that hourglass, you will make decisions differently, and not necessarily for the better. So reduce that to the amount that you can, and do it in stages. Get it out in tiny steps. To this point, your big vision needs to be their little steps, right? So break it down for them so they can understand what each tranche of funding, each dollar goes to, and then break it down as much as you can. Again, back to the hurdle concept. If we don't get past getting the product into market, the global release strategy that we need $50 million to execute on becomes kind of irrelevant, right? Nobody wants to buy this thing. So break it down as much as you can. I have a lot more to say about that. We don't have a lot of time. The story about I really want to hammer home this point on purpose. So these guys are a really interesting story. Two founders, opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of need for their own product. One of them was consistently overweight his entire life, right? Typical American story. And he was challenged with his weight his entire life. He decided he wanted to solve that in his early 20s. And so he started to really put together a regimen that worked well for him. And he found he had to balance both the type of exercise and the diet together, and he figured this out. His partner, on the other hand, had always, he was 6'1" at 15 or something and weighed 110 pounds, right? So that's a pretty skinny dude. So he wanted to gain weight, he wanted to work out, he wanted somebody tailored to him. So they made this website called BodBod, and they gathered 150,000 users, free users, and so people were using this thing like crazy. They came to us a year and a half into this saying, we need to release an app because the website's useless at the gym. Nobody wants to take their laptop to the gym, we need to make this an app. We need $50,000. I said, we've got 150,000 users. Yeah, but they won't pay us. Okay, well, let's talk about that. So we looked at what they tried to do. They just tried to bomb their list over and over again. They had 150,000 people signed up, and they're like, hey, buy this premium feature. Hey, buy this premium feature. Didn't work, so we said, let's try crowdfunding. And let's make it part of the story. Let's tell them your story, right? Don't ask them to buy your product. Ask them to buy into what you're trying to accomplish. Let them be part of your story. So long story short, they ended up doing 2 crowdfunds with us. In total, they raised $160,000, I think. Because people got invested in what they were trying to do. They wanted to be part of the BodBod story. They had their own story to tell. We incorporated all of that, and so part of the contribution you could make was your own story as opposed to funding. Very cool social campaign. Worked out really well for them. we're just about to wrap up. That's cool. So a few key things to consider. Again, don't let perspective get in the way of vision, guys. It's so easy as an entrepreneur to get myopic and to consider whatever the one little thing you're trying to work on right now is the most important thing in the world. Take a step back, or if you can't because you're the technical one or you're the financial one or whatever it is, talk to your co-founder, get a co-founder, talk to somebody, preferably not your mom or your best friend. They always tell you you're awesome. But get some perspective, right? Try to get outside your own box. Give the purpose, get the power. It really, really works. And I have hundreds of stories I can tell you about when this worked and why it works. Just like the BotBot story, you have to let people get involved in what you're doing and turn them into contributors, right? Nobody wants to be a consumer. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks like, God, I can't wait to just bump Coke's revenues a little higher. But waking up in the morning and thinking, if I have a little time to send out that one more email before I go to my presentation today, maybe I can get so-and-so to launch their crowdfund today, and that's going to change their lives. That's a big deal to me. This is important. The crowd is not inherently good. It can make you, it can break you, right? Crowds historically have been seen as threatening, right? In the US, it was one of the major tenets of our Constitution. The right to assemble, right? The right to be a crowd. You didn't used to have that privilege. They didn't want to see you as a crowd because you'd do something horrible, like kill the monarch or throw a tea in the harbor. And so they really wanted to limit this. And there's a reason, there's power in it, but it can go both ways, all right? So be very careful how you engage the crowd. If you approach them with good intent and you're trying to provide them value, they're likely to give it back. If all you're trying to do is suck the life out of them and get a few more dollars, they'll see right through that. Crowd isn't the only way. It's really important, and it's a really critical step in launching a business now, and I encourage everyone to consider it, but don't take this approach and think that crowdfunding is the magic bullet, or crowdsourcing is the magic bullet for my business, combined with everything else. It was a lot more magic a few years ago. Now it's becoming closer to a hygiene factor where a lot of people are doing this, so it's really now become a competitive thing. If you're not engaging the crowd in a meaningful way, somebody else in your space probably is. Remember that we're all in this together, right? We're a room of people who at least have something in common around wanting to start a business or being interested in how the crowd engages, so we're all potential nodes into each other's networks. Don't take that for granted. One or two primary connections with the right people can make or break a business. It can make all the difference in the world. And so can the support you get from these folks. I want to help you guys any way I can. I know this is really quick, so grab that. That's all my personal details except for my mobile number, which I'll happily give you. I just didn't think anybody would want to make that phone call. You can get me at Clarity. Actually, just email me, guys, or hit me at Twitter. That's not my full Clarity link, and I'll give you the one that's the free link so you can book a call without paying me for it, because that would feel really gross.
Wow. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Give him a hand. I'd like to just maybe leave room for like two or three questions now. We'll have a panel discussion as well. But do anyone here in the audience have a question now for Ryan? You should take it now. You'll also wrap up in the panel discussion. Okay, I have a question actually. You've been talking about the tech crunch effect.
Yeah.
How do you achieve that? I mean, how do you do that?
Sadly, it's not something you can really aim for. Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry, it's not.
That's what it is.
Okay, so it's not really something you can aim for, guys. Media needs to be earned. It's hard to buy and it's hard to make that happen. So the TechCrunch effect is something, it's a nice byproduct of other good activities. So the reason that they're going to cover you is you've done something else, you've probably been covered somewhere else, or you're doing something that's meaningful in the market. So aim to do great things, don't aim to get great media, but make sure that you're open to the opportunities, make sure that you're doing everything you can to engage in those populations, and you do have to reach out. So it's important to do the research, understand people in your space, what are they after, what are they trying to read on a daily basis, and get in those places. It's not impossible, but it does take work. It's biz dev like anything else.
Yeah, question.
Yeah. I know a few people who have done crowdfunding campaigns, and they said that the worst thing about crowdfunding is at times how much the people who are funding you want to be engaged with the service, because you end up spending too much time asking questions and engaging with the people that are actually developing it. Do you have any advice how to kind of like negate this effect of ending up spending too much time just talking to the audience than getting things done?
So yeah, first of all, that's a great problem to have, right? If people want to talk to you and they want to talk about your product, that's the right problem to have. So I'd be curious to find out how they like actually running their business after they raise their funding, because I don't imagine that it got any lighter. So expect that. The ways that you negate those things, and I would need to see their specific campaigns. One of the things that people do that's the death of a crowdfund, or at least the start of a nightmare like that, is to include too many rewards tiers, right? So don't inundate people with 500 choices. Give them 3 meaningful ones and let them go home. That's all they need, right? You don't have 500 options that are meaningful, even 7 or 8. Just gives people analysis paralysis. They can't make the decision. So give them 3 to 4 meaningful decisions. Let them make those. That would be one. The other one is really about what you're asking people to do. Be clear in your call to action. Be clear in how they're supporting what you're doing, because you can start to focus their attention on that. If you just throw up a product and a product brief with a bunch of tech specs, they're going to ask a bunch of questions about that stuff. So drive the conversation with what you're putting up there. The other thing to do, use the comments feature and use the updates feature. Nobody does this, and so they end up answering the same question 500 times instead of posting an update to the profile about it. So be proactive. If people are asking a question, tell everybody the answer. Don't just tell that one person.
More questions now? We have a last question maybe before Peter goes on. Otherwise, we'll do it in the wrap-up. Give Ryan a big hand. Thanks, Ryan. And now this is what always happens. Oh, now something happening. Hey, it works. Fantastic. Okay. Look at this. And now, while Peter Hill is untangling all the wires, it's fantastic. I'll just bid welcome. Peter is like researching in the future, I would say, and is the project leader behind a really big project called the We Economy. But I'm sure Peter will tell you a bit about this as well. And you have 10 minutes, Peter. So, and no slides now. What happened?
You can work on that, I suppose.
Yeah, we can start talking.
Okay, I'll start.
Give Peter a big hand. Welcome, Peter.
Well, anyway, my name is Peter Hessedal. I'm the project manager of a project called the We Economy, which is close to completion. And the idea of the project is to look at how can Danish businesses adapt their business models to fit into a number of large changes that are happening in the economy. And the most important changes are basically that we are being much more connected than we used to be. I wish I had a sense that this was happening. It is a collaboration between DEA, a think tank in Copenhagen, Service Platform, and the Danish Design Center. What's up? It's a pity, really nice slides.
Not too messy.
Okay, well, what I'm going to talk about is the way that the economy has changed. Maybe just like this. Can we just do it like that?
Just do it like
this. That works. Yeah.
Just say change, and then I'll change.
Yeah, change. So it used to be that basically I'm going to no change. Okay. Sorry about this. In a moment I'll be back on footing. Okay, so this is where we're coming from. It used to be that our society was an industrial society, and there was a certain way of operating in industrial society. Because societies, the idea was that you would broadcast the same mass-produced objects to people who were then consumers, and they would consume the stuff, and they would have no responsibility, and they would have no way of giving their feedback to the manufacturers. It was a one-way process, and it was the same object that everybody bought. But a lot of stuff has happened since then, and one of the things that have happened is that we now have some tools. The means of productions are in everybody's hands. So now we can actually sort of reach in, and we are becoming interactive with the production process. And this is what we can now start to see customization. That companies can compete on creating products that fit a particular user very, very exactly. And the way they can do that is because we now have the tools to reach in and specify what do we want. So now it's more of a two-way process. The next thing that happens is that we now have the tools also to start manufacturing stuff at a very, very different scale. So if you wanted to create professional quality objects, you would have to have a professional style factory that had massive investments. And this is why we have these capitalist monopolies where capitalists were the only ones who could produce certain things. But now we have stuff like 3D printers. So again, we have been empowered to participate in new ways. A third thing that has happened is that we now have platforms that can coordinate a lot of very small resources. You probably all know the expression the long tail, because so many people have the opportunity to create stuff. There's so many people making content and making their voice heard. Now we have these platforms that can organize it and make meaningful processes out of this. So value creation is now very much organized by some central platforms, and these platforms will be the major players of the new economy. So you can look at the valuations of some of these companies, and you can see that these are the new giants in the economy. What all of this makes possible is that it used to be that we could only work in very large increments. We could have one car at a time, the whole car at a time. You couldn't really mobilize into the economy the value of just one car seat from Aarhus to København. There's a lot of very small resources out there, but it just wasn't cost efficient to mobilize them. But now all this plankton can be accessed. And this is a new factor in the economy, that a lot of new participants have entered and a lot of new resources are part of the economic game. So it's a game of participation. It used to be the classic example that encyclopedia could only be produced by the absolutely professional and the chosen ones. Again, this broadcast model with only a select few being able to define what's happening. But now, participation is both an opportunity, but it's also a demand. We have to participate in order to get the stuff that we really need. We are also responsible for getting what we want. And this you can see this in this classical maker value chain, that we can start almost any product. If you just have a PC and you have an internet connection and you have some 3D software, you can start creating an object. You can and then you can put it online. And you can find a forum where you can enter into a collective process of creation. And this is another change in the way that the economy works. It used to be that it was hard to connect to people, but now it's a natural thing to connect to everybody else and be part of a community and co-create stuff. And when you're done with that, of course, if you don't have a 3D printer, you can send it to one of the platforms that will 3D print the stuff for you. And if you're really successful, you will send it to Alibaba, and they'll find a nice factory in China who will ship a larger quantity of this for you. And still, you're just sitting with your PC at your kitchen table. And you can sell it via Etsy, or you can go on eBay or Amazon and sell the stuff. And you can even advertise globally, and still just from your own PC by using AdWords. And no matter how obscure your product is, it will pop up the moment somebody with the right profile somewhere in the world checks in. And then finally, of course, it used to be that if you wanted to get anywhere with this, you would have to go to the banks, and you would have this monopoly banks. And now we don't have to do that. We can raise money to move ahead from crowdfunding sites. So all in all, this is a very, very different economy, and it's worth just dwelling on how different this is. It's a collective, it's collaborative, it involves the users in a completely different way, and this is the strength of it. It's not only for startups. This is Lego's Lego Idea site. If 10,000 people like one of the suggestions that some users have put online, then Lego will consider this to develop it into an official set. So it's an example of companies that have managed to somehow open up their process to the ideas from the crowd. And it's very, very hard to find companies that actually have done this successfully. So basically, it's about some new roles that are emerging and some old roles that are dissolving. And I think co-creation and collaboration is really a key word in this new economy. It's not about doing stuff, me, myself, our company, we can do it alone. It's very, very clear from the start, and you could hear that from the last talk also, it's about engaging the crowd immediately, get more and more people on board, have a broad reach. So suddenly the producer and the consumer start to be, you know, a little of each and turning into this new hybrid. Again, the professionals and the amateurs, they merge, and the company and the crowd also, in some senses, merge. And all of this is a very, very different economy, and that's basically what I wanted to tell you. These rules may seem obvious if you are young and a startup, but this is not obvious to most people who have been working in industry for just a few years. And I can tell you that on the 24th of June, we will launch this report with a lot of tools that are meant for existing companies to reconsider in what ways a traditional business model needs to change in order to be relevant under this new regime of changed ways of creating value. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So remember to mark your calendars for June 24th. Now we don't take questions. We'll wait for the panel debate. We'll actually go to the next speaker. Christine, where are you? You're there. Exactly. Here. Well, I'll just put this on. You're actually a ninja. You're a crowdsourcing ninja. What does a ninja do?
Well, I'm a crowdfunding ninja. I'm moving into sourcing, but I'm not there yet. So, well, I started working with crowdfunding a couple of years ago, and at that point, nobody basically wanted to talk to me. So I work in the Danish Business Authority, which is a part of the Ministry for Business and Growth. And whenever I breached the subject of crowdfunding to another bureaucrat, they were looking at me like I was going insane. So this little hippie project, I don't know what you're thinking about, people giving away money. We don't want any part of that. So I made it my mission to sneak in crowdfunding in every single growth strategy initiative coming out of government. And I got a little help, let me tell you that. So that's where the ninja part comes in. Also, my Danish title is fuldmægtig, and every day I work with entrepreneurs, and it sounds way cool in English, it's head of section. But fuldmægtig isn't really something that entrepreneurs buy. It sounds very boring and very public. So being a ninja sort of helped me on. Now, to what I'm actually here to talk to you about. We did this report, I don't know if you've seen it. It came out from the government on May 4th, I think. We've been working on it for quite a long time. The reason why I work with crowdfunding is this is the Danish venture capital market, or the Danish capital market, and most startups and SMEs go to banks. So what happens when the banks say no? Well, only a very small percent, under 10% of companies getting a no in the bank actually look to alternative finance. So there's a huge market to grow companies in Denmark if we can get them to use alternative finance such as crowdfunding. So I don't want to say so much about where crowdfunding comes from. I think Ryan said it very well. It grows out of this desire to be a part of something bigger. It will affect every single sector out there. So regardless of what you're doing, you need to know that this tool is there. How can you use the crowd in your company? Crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. Can you engage with your consumers? And you know, the public sector will also need to take this in. So I'm going to go back to that later, just give you a little teaser of something that we're working on within the public sector to be more open. Now, where are we now? So we released the report. It's going through what are the framework within crowdfunding in Denmark today. What we did was we looked at the 4 different types of crowdfunding. Is everyone familiar with these 4 types? Anyone who doesn't know all 4 types? Yes, so we'll just swiftly say them. Now, very shortly, donation-based crowdfunding, you give money without getting anything in return, except wow, you're such a good person, right? So this is NGOs. It's not that many companies funding like this. Reward-based crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, in Denmark, Boomerang. You give money, you get a product or service in return. So you get something, but it's not money. That's the non-financial crowdfunding. The financial crowdfunding, lending and equity. Lending, a group of lenders gives a loan to a company and get interest in return. And equity, a crowd buys in to a company to get a piece of the company. Okay, so we looked at these 4 types of crowdfunding. We saw that there were 3 actors within this scope. The backer, the company. In donation, this would mainly be organizations, and then the platforms. And then we saw, okay, what were the rules in donation? What were the rules for backers, platforms, and companies? And same with the 3 other types. So these are some, you know, if I were to go into every single rule, the report is 43 pages long, so we don't really have time for that. But some of the key takeaways is 2 things. In Denmark, if you want to use reward-based crowdfunding, we, and very importantly, the tax authorities, are seeing this as an internet purchase. For you as a company, that means that any income you get out of your reward-based campaign will go into your company as a sale. You'll then have some expenses in production, and at the end of the fiscal year, you'll pay tax of whatever surplus you might have in your company. This is really important because if we're talking about donation-based crowdfunding, you pay a gift tax of the full amount of money that you're raising. Okay? So, and also, if you are doing reward-based, please be sure if your product is applicable to that much. It's pretty important, it's 25% in Denmark. And then another key takeaway from this is that equity crowdfunding is legal in Denmark. We haven't seen a platform opening up yet. I think Crowdcube is very close to opening up in Denmark. It's quite a complex tool. It's not for startups. You can't be in an APS or an IBS registered company. You need to be an AS company. If you are considering equity, come talk to me and I'll explain you how you can do it. And then just whatever kind of crowdfunding you want to do, protect yourself, protect your company. What kind of rights can you actually have to your product? You know, you are putting everything out there for the crowd to see. There are Chinese companies scouting platforms to be sure that you're protecting yourself and be sure that you know the tax rules. The taxation authorities are coming out with a guide. They are improving that guide and we will be talking to them again. So, are we there yet? Absolutely not. I could have taken a picture of my desk, but my handwriting is horrible, so I get the PowerPoint version instead. So, there are a lot of tasks on my desk, but one is to spread the knowledge about crowdfunding, what rules apply in Denmark now. So we can have better campaigns, more successful Danish campaigns. Another one is, so we did this report on the framework, but we can do better. Because one of the things is, you get the money first, and then you start production. If we're talking about a reward-based campaign, and the tax system, the way we pay that, is not handling that very well. It becomes hugely complex for startups who have to get into very complex tax rules. And we can do way better, we can make it a lot better for you guys. So depending on how the world looks after the next election, which is coming up very soon, we'll hopefully keep working with this one. And then, you know, I work at a ministry. I also work on an EU level. And one of the challenges when we're talking about the financial crowdfunding types is that the regulation within the EU country is not harmonized at all. So what we're trying to do now is really get the Commission to comply to having some harmonized rules so that you don't have to limit your funding to Denmark, but you basically raise money from across Europe. It's some way coming. I think we'll have better luck with harmonizing the Scandinavian countries as a start. So that's coming up hopefully very, very soon. Now, Europe, as I said, we have some way to go. We've seen a lot of single regulation coming out of different EU countries, some very successful, like the UK. It's a booming market, it's really looking well. We have seen some Danish companies moving to the UK. That gives me a really good platform to go to politicians and say we have to make better rules. We're also seeing countries like Italy doing some very weird rules, which doesn't seem to be working very well. In the US, the Jobs Act is finally being fully implemented. It's going to be really exciting to see how that can sort of drive the entire market in the US forward. And we are seeing Asia coming up very, very fast. Not so much within the financial crowdfunding types, but very much within reward and donation. So that's crowdfunding. But we're working on different projects. One is match funding through reward-based crowdfunding. If you have a consumer product that is innovative, it's new, and it's had some global scaling, the Market Development Fund, it's Markedsmodningsfonden in Danish, have a new initiative where we match fund reward-based campaigns coming out of Denmark. So please look into that one. We have crowdfunding guarantees coming out of the Growth Fund. So lending-based platforms can do crowdfunding guarantees on loans. We have a crowdsourcing, the challenge.dk is hopefully coming this fall. So instead of doing public procurement, we'll actually do challenges from the government to give startups access to having the government as consumers or as buyers. So that's some of the things that we're working on, and then we are also looking into the sharing economy. Is there any regulatory barriers? So if you have a collaborative economy company, please approach me if you have experienced any difficulties with government. Yay! That's it for that?
Yeah, give a hand. Thank you. That was like the official Denmark. Now we'd actually like to hear a case story. This is the first one from Christian Engel from a company called Hardreacher. And see if we get you back to work with those words. And I think Hardreacher is like the only consulting company in Denmark who does consulting and crowdsourcing stuff, right?
I would like to say that we are the largest consultancy in Denmark with crowdfunding, but I think it's true to say we're the only one. So I guess I'll do the first one. I like that one better. So no worries. So guys, my job today is kind of give you a brief on what's going on in Denmark in crowdfunding. We've been dumb enough to start a business as our only activity as crowdfunding, and I'd like to tell you what we've kind of figured out and all the learnings that we've been taught. So yeah, I'm from crowdfunding agency called Hardreacher, and we work based on 3 areas. We work with reward-based, getting cases ready on Kickstarter, professionalizing them. We work with equity crowdfunding, helping people sell shares to the crowd and to build a better business. And we work with investor relations. How can you manage 4,000 investors? That's a really, really tough job. So today, I would really like to first up kind of talk about reward-based crowdfunding. I'll give you the facts from all the campaigns crunched in Denmark from 2013 to 2014. You can read our full report. I'll give you some facts. I'd like to talk about the possibilities, how I see crowdfunding in Denmark and what possibilities that are there. And then I'll briefly touch upon equity crowdfunding in Denmark, what possibilities I see, the facts, and then I'll give you some key takeaways. So guys, you ready for it? let's go. The facts, crowdfunding Denmark 2013-2014. This is really interesting. And I'm just gonna, you can read the full report, I'm just gonna say something. So 64% of all campaigns on Kickstarter fail. I tried to tell a journalist this, and I was like, you know, can you please publish this report? I'd love the public in Denmark to know. And it's like, yeah, but it's not that good a story. So if you read that articles in the newspaper, crowdfunding is like a new miracle. It's like, you know, you put something in the oven, you give it 20 minutes, 35 days, you put it out, you've got 500,000 kroner. Genius. It's not like that. That's what the number says. So we saw like, where is the success rate? And where's the largest by the largest product categories? And I think this one, guys, look, web 0%, don't crowdfund your app, god damn it. It's not a place for that. It's a place to crowdfund creative products, something you really need, something that can tell its own purpose within 10 seconds. And that's what we see hardware product design in games. Some apps, not many documentaries, unfortunately, that's every Coco. But, so this is quite interesting. In 2014, last year, Kickstarter launched in Denmark, which means that now you can actually launch projects from Denmark on Kickstarter. Before, in 2013, you had to go to Kickstarter in the US or the UK in order to use Kickstarter. So look at the success rate, and then look at the average funding per campaign. Now let's press forward. 2014, now everybody can join. 19%, 340,000. Guys, it's not like, what happened while we were there was that people just started, you know, just putting campaigns on Kickstarter. And because they don't have to go to a country like the US and make some kind of qualified estimation on what's necessary to do a crowdfunding campaign, the quality is worsened. So this is my job. This is Denmark right now, and that's crowdfunding. And we all need in this room to kind of look at that rock and shape it and make it drive much faster. So, so what are the possibilities? Now can we help this rock, you know, become crowdfunding? We work in like 5 steps, and I think it's really good for all of you to just know. We start by, you know, prepare. You know, I think the Google AdWords was really great. Name Google AdWords. How many people does buy it? Who buys it? Then just start a crowdfunding campaign and make it specific for them, and then bring your own customers as well. You know, and I think like one of the ways to see crowdfunding in Denmark, and I think it was put right before, is it's just, I was asked by a journalist, what is crowdfunding? I said, it's a modern press release. Like, if you have a cool product and people want to buy it, that's the greatest way to get media attention. That's crowdfunding. Because you can actually place it all up and you can say, we reached our goal in 1 day, and now we're overfunding. They love it. So do that, prepare, build the campaign, takes time, and launch. That's, I think, with all my experience with crowdfunding, that's the hardest, that's the launch. Because the launch is like the perfect storm. All of the people who has to buy it, all of your friends, all your family have to buy it at the exact same time, and all the press. And that's the hardest job, I think. And then you have 2 weeks where nothing happens, and 1 week where you have the fear of missing out. People are like, oh, it's ending in a week, we need to go there. And then you have to maintain the lines. So all in all, I think it's really much a segmentation exercise as well. You know, getting who are my crowd, who did buy my stuff, where do I target them, how many percent of my campaign can what segment buy. Okay, so I'm going really fast here because we need to get through it all. So how can we, earlier we talked about how the Kickstarter problem is that you actually cannot raise the funds to produce and make your certain thing and make it a good business. And that's why I see crowdfunding more as, you know, the entrepreneur's new bargaining power. Like before, when you came to the bank or the VCs, you had nothing, you couldn't do anything. All of a sudden you've got this miracle in hand, which is crowdfunding. You can go up to a VC saying, if you want to buy my product, or if you want to buy in, here's a bargain. If I sell 1,000, how much am I worth to you? If I sell 2,000, how much am I worth to you? Find your own position, and then once he agrees, then you go out there and you sell 5,000. You should be able to do it. It's so good. So we see kind of before you would go, you know, just horizontal. You have a VC and you have a VA angel, then you'll get the investment and you'll be a market. Now what we see now is you can actually go down. So that's our smart feature. You can say proof of market, saying, yeah, I think your idea is quite nice, But in order for us to vest, you have to go through a crowdfunding campaign. Then we would love to follow up. So they'll come down to us, and we'll put them through a reward-based crowdfunding, and then they can make their investment based on, based on the validation. The another model, which I think is also quite cool, is you go to the VC investment, then you can go down to us, and we'll put you through equity crowdfunding, and they can say, well, we would like to share the deal where we go in for 10% together with the crowd, but the crowd will send 10% to the crowd, but the 20% will be held by us. So we spread our risk so they don't just have 30%. And that's where it gets super interesting, because this means that the public can actually, they can be in deals together with the VCs, led by the VCs. And that's something I think is really cool. I know this is kind of complicated, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. But this is the future, I'm telling you. So, very briefly, equity crowdfunding in Denmark. I'm going to tell you a story now. Now, just sit back and look at these numbers. This is so insane. This is a beer company. So, this is 2008. Just keep on looking at the beer brews and the shareholders. They're 2 shareholders. They haven't sold any equity yet to the people, meaning that none of you have a share, and none in the world have a share except 2 guys. That looks 2009. Now they got 1,329 shareholders. That's you and me in the room. And look at the beers brewed. Double the size, more than double the size. Well, let's take 1 year more. 15,000, 1 bar. 1 year more, another equity round. 26,000, 67 employees. 1 year more. 135, 36,000. 1 year more, 224. 14,000 shareholders. 1 year more, that's 2014. This is the power of equity crowdfunding. When you get this many shareholders, you have this many people buying your beers and sharing the deal with everybody else, buying beers to your friend, meaning that you can scale at a totally different level, meaning you can build business without banks and without VCs and just run the shit out of it. Yeah.
De havde VC på, they actually had a VC, Brewdog, but the 2 first
Definitely.
was the only one.
Definitely. They must have had a VC of some sort, but the initial scaling was made through by the crowd. So maybe they had a rich uncle or something, but the scaling, which you normally have a Series B or Series A for, was done completely again by the crowd.
The VC actually also helped them with the crowd campaign.
Exactly. So, and then they made, the world's strongest beer, which is inside a really cool squirrel. I love that. So, this is getting to, this is just my kind of, naive young take on equity crowdfunding in Denmark. Like Christina said, we cannot do it unless you have 500,000. Then you could do AS under construction, where you have to pay 125,000 Danish kroner, but then you'll have a really expensive round, since the investors will come into the initial funding. So the kind of the spread in the company will be very uneven. It will be very hard to administrate legal-wise and have a beneficial ratio of investors and personal risk. The rest of the money is bound up to you. So if I'm a guy and I want to go an equity crowdfund, then if something happens, then I am liable to pay the rest of the fee of the 500,000 kroner, and that's putting me in a really, really bad position. So coming back to the equity crowdfunding platforms, you can all go to an equity crowdfunding platform. Don't wait for Crowdcube Denmark. This is a guy who's made his own crowdfunding platform in order to earn some money on Crowdcube. You can go to Seegers, you can go everywhere. So what I want you to do right now is register your company as an AS if you want to do crowdfunding, or register a new company in the UK or Sweden, and go to international platforms that is funded by me, Crowdcube, or Seeders. This is it. So I'm going to tell you the Trunkbird story. This is 2 guys, really cool team. They're doing Airbnb for delivering. So they're basically, if you want to have a package from Jutland to Copenhagen, they've made a platform for that, and they are scaling at a really, really fast amount, and it's going really well. They want to take us crowdfund, and we found out about this. And there were really a lot of investors lined up, and it could be such a good reference story. But then we found out that they would have to be liable for the rest of the money, to the rest of the 350,000 kroner. They'll be liable for personally, and they were already pretty poor because they were entrepreneurs. But if they're doing all this, if you're having a package sent from Jutland to Copenhagen, if somebody takes that package, then they could be personal bankrupt because of the law. So, and they need the money. It's all right there. So you can be personally bankrupt and have no money. So I think it's a quite cool story about, and they actually, they're in Berlin right now. But this is just one of the many companies we lost to our bad equity crowdfunding laws. So key takeaways: Denmark needs better crowdfunding campaigns. Help us make them. Seek advice, like whenever you go on the platform, don't just put it up. Like, this is your business, this is not a product you have to sell. This is like what you're gonna live for the next 20 years. So take time into it, don't just put a game up. Really take time. Crowdfunding is a marketing exercise, not a passive sales channel. Like I said, it's not an oven that gives you these 500,000 kroner. And I think this is quite cool. Like, now you have a voice. Use crowdfunding to negotiate better deals for your startup so you can grow. And then, if you use crowdfunding, don't expect seed money unless you go to UK or Sweden. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian. Goodbye. Actually, then I'd like to invite Christine, Peter, Ryan up for a little short panel discussion, and maybe we should give Christian here as well. You want to sit as well?
Yeah.
That would be great. Grab some mics. Actually, I'd like to start with you, Christina. What do you think about this advice from Christian? We should go to the UK as we.
You know, if I just step away from where I work and talk as, you know, a person who knows a lot about crowdfunding, is this even on? Is it on? Yeah. So I think Christian is right to some extent. Sadly, I don't think it's the perfect rule that we have now, but you know, we've played this game, and I've worked a lot with these guys. So we played this game where we sort of came up to how can we do this for startups in Denmark? How can we do this? And we played this game like, can we do it like this? And I went back to the guys who actually write the law and company in Denmark saying, so guys, what do you think about this? And they say, okay, congratulations, you've now destroyed all APS companies in Denmark. So that's sort of my challenge. I do think we can do better. It's just really hard without targeting every single APS company in Denmark.
What's your reaction to listening to the Danish market?
It sounds exciting.
Sounds exciting. It sounds like you guys have a lot more going on than a lot of the EU countries in terms of specific approach. The fact that you're lobbying from inside the government as opposed to stiff-arming people who are trying makes a big difference. You know, you alluded to all the changes that are happening in the U.S. now, and there's so much happening right now so fast for us. We don't even know how to react. In fact, our lawyers have told me I'm not allowed to talk about it, but I'm here, so as long as you guys promise not to tell. The stuff that's happening now with Title III and Title IV is really exciting. You're watching that very closely, I'm sure. We have really mixed thoughts on it, but it seems like you guys are off to a great start here. Happy to share some of the headaches and heartaches that we've had from our side. We're probably a little further along in the process, but one of the things that we've seen is that and I'll call it a micro market, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but that you actually have a much better chance of success at driving these things at the legislative and the regulatory levels than larger countries like, and particularly litigious companies like, you know, we love to sue over anything. So everything has to be carefully considered before we open up new legislation.
Also questions from the audience, actually. There was one down here. I think there was a question. You had a question here?
I have a question for you, Christian, yes. Because you said that you were going to kind of like sell your message like this is your business, this is what you're going to live for the next 15 years. But when you're making your campaign, does this mean that you have to kind of like sell this is my business, or do you still have to focus on the product? Because I just gave advice before we started about this, so I'd like to have an unbiased second opinion to the other person in the room.
You should never sell your crowdfunding campaign as your business and show them the business model and that kind of thing. This is a user experience. Like a guy told me, crowdfunding is reality TV for startups. And that's it. I mean, people buy into stupid ideas like exploding kittens because there's something there. They don't care about the sales margins and anything else. And that's also the problem with reward-based crowdfunding, like we heard before. They're not going to help you grow your business. They're going to be your pain in the ass wanting their product really fast. So, but if you care enough about your business, then you should go out and spend really long time researching how can I create, you know, what makes people tick. You know, do a good presentation. You know, get your graphics done, don't do it yourself. Those kind of things, like, you know, put your heart into it, because, you know, you're wasting other people's time if you don't. And I think that was my, you know, kind of purpose.
Then we agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we have music here going. Okay. How do you react to those numbers from Denmark, Peter, that it's actually gone down?
That's actually going down. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder where all of this sharing economy and this public involvement leads to. I think there's a lot of interest in it right now. I think things will calm down and become more normal soon. Frankly, I think I'd be curious to see what way that we will find that are sort of the normal. I would imagine, I could see how big banks would become involved in this and make it a product that would be much less freaky and strange and just become much more of a normal thing. And I think that will eventually happen. I don't know. Right now it's very chaotic, and I think the next level will be some kind of making it normal.
Do you have can I ask a question to follow on? Do you have a sense that it's kind of gone over the hill in terms of its popularity at mass scale? There's a name for the curve, and I don't remember, but there's a position in the curve called the trough of despair, right, where you come off of the high peak where everybody's really excited about it. Do you feel like that's where Denmark is?
I think that's what happens. If you look at the sharing economy, I think we found out that sharing apartments, sharing cars works. It's not clear that anything else really works. Frankly, there's tons of startups. There's a lot of very good ideas that do not achieve the density that's necessary to make a proper business. And I think a lot of this stuff also is very fun and interesting, and anybody who's interested in business wants to start a startup. But I think somehow this will find a different structure.
I think crowdfunding hasn't begun yet at all. Like we're working in a soccer match right now with St. Pauli. It's like a cult club in Germany. We're trying to get him up and to play a match with a Danish division club called Frico Farm. And when I stand there, nobody knows the internet. I have to make an account. I have to pay. How does it work? If we can't do crowdfunding in a soccer club with fans, that's like the perfect space for crowdfunding, because people love the club, they'll do anything for the club. And we have to facilitate them into kind of a virtual space where we can create new stuff. And that's what crowdfunding is. It's not like an open call. Yes, it is to some extent. If you have a cool is cooler, then it's like an open call to the world, help my project. But I see crowdfunding as a local and international thing. And crowdfunding can be locally a way of distributing money to new initiatives and giving new experiences to the public in that area, to the local area. And when I see this, I know that when people when I see kids playing with iPads 10 years old, they're gonna grow up with mobile pay. Imagine what's gonna happen when they're 32 and mobile pay is a thing of the past, and they are interested. They can see any product. They can probably tap something on their arm and they automatically back from a virtual bank account in the neck. I don't know, but it's crazy. I think they're moving fast.
Using Bitcoin, of course.
You have a question, Dominic?
Yes, this is addressed. Okay, this is addressed to Ryan. When we're going to see the opening of the new Title III and Title IV in the States, how do you see Fundable's role in sort of bridging between your current accredited investors and future non-accredited retail investors?
Sure. So we're on the fence about this. I have 3 partners in the company, and I say we're probably almost evenly split in terms of our opinion of what's going to happen. There's this sense that there's going to be a gold rush, right? We open up the doors so that now anybody can become an investor. We haven't seen a ton of validation around the ideas that people are just dying to become investors in companies, right? They want to buy equity in companies. We haven't seen a lot of people. So for the startups who've raised money already, I'll ask you, would you want 5 people in your cap table or 500 people in your cap table? I don't know how the legislation is here, but in the US it's still the case that depending on how and who you raise from, you're liable for annual reporting to all these folks. So you can actually take on a huge cost burden by taking so many people into the cap table. So it's still a very uncertain term. we don't know what's going to happen yet. We don't know that there's going to be this huge glut of investment. So honestly, we're in kind of wait and see mode. We're pre-compliant, we're ready. We're working with a very interesting company out of Harvard right now that will handle the compliance piece for us. We're working on it now with these guys, and that should go a long way to ease the frustration and to automate a lot of the challenge around it. So that should make it far simpler. One of the things that we have attempted in the past in current legislation is the challenge. We did a hybrid raise where they were raising both rewards and equity at the same time. And so we see that there may be some further step towards that where you actually get people operating in a different tier for the non-accrediteds, the current non-accrediteds, people who will be accredited in the future, but with some different restrictions. So they might buy into a different class of stock, for example. So there may be different treatment of different tiers of investors. It's going to depend largely on how the rules are actually penned, because they're not finalized yet. So we don't fully understand the regulatory environment yet.
Can I maybe follow up on that one? Because during the report, we actually looked quite a lot on what other countries are doing. And one of the things we always do in Denmark is look to the US, thinking that we can export or import all legislation. And I do think that if we can get the EU regulation going, where the Commission is looking now for regulation in equity and lending will actually give us a better platform in the EU than the US. Because the requirements for the platforms will be less. We'll put more, sort of having it within the same framework as traditional banking and brokers will give a more professional setup and will make it easier for you guys. Then I think it's going to be in the US. And had some meetings with the US Securities and Exchange Commission. So,
They showed up at our
I show up one person asking all the questions. They showed up 10 to answer them.
That's the way they do it.
It's sort of a difference.
That way they have enough to take you away if they need to.
Yes,
They don't like the conversation. Yeah, it's a scary process. Yeah, so we anticipate some kind of a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Bad things are going to happen to good people at some point.
Mike, let's do it, Mike.
What's that?
Oh,
sorry, you told me to do this. God, I'm not good at this thing. I want that one back in my head. So I think about it. So, we expect bad things to happen. Bad things will happen, right? Somebody's grandma's going to invest in a startup, anticipating a return like GE. She's going to call and ask for dividends. They're going to have to move her out of her fancy retirement home in Boca, and she's going to have to move in with one of the son-in-laws, and it's going to turn to shit really quick, right? So there will be some bad stories. I'm joking, but things will happen. The legislation will tighten, as it always does in the U.S. Anytime we sort of give people a little bit of rope, I have the sense that we're giving startups and funding sources now enough rope to potentially hang ourselves with. They're essentially giving us get going fast enough so we can really trip you so that when you fall, we can keep you down. Don't know that that's true, but there's some sense that may be the case.
And then just like a comment to like the regulation and stuff. Like I think it's really important to say that we're in COBA land right now. I mean, like the way that we are, because the way that the regulation got in, I don't know if there is one in Sweden. I mean,
they're totally closing their eyes.
They're closing their eyes. Things are going too fast.
Use the Swedish platform. Be aware.
I mean, and the same in the UK. Like it just went so fast. Like people began backing a new economy, just bursted out because of technology. And I think what you should really take away from this is that go back some equity crowdfunding projects and help this get started, because for the first time Europe is actually we've done something really cool, and the government are they're not stopping it. They're actually trying to help us do this. So but we need to get started. Like I see way too few people in Denmark using equity crowdfunding. How many of you have invested in equity crowdfunding? We need many more. Much more people. Okay. And that's yeah.
I think that's a really good end quote before we go for coffee and sugar, actually. Give them all a big hand. Christian, Ryan, Christine, Peter. Now, coffee and cake in 20 minutes. It should be here. So be back in 20 minutes.
overvurderet, altså hvor meget arbejde der ligger i de forhold til mange penge, de får lavet. Altså klassisk besætning, og måske bare levere sig værker, og selvfølgelig ikke leveret. Tror jeg, at det er sikkert. Jeg har ikke fået noget spil i det. Og bare sige, ved du hvad, sorry guys, we fucked up, det kommer, altså et eller andet. Ja, sådan, stil. Ja, det er sådan, okay, så ved man, hvis det sker. Ja, det er selvfølgelig være en balance. De informerer bare slet ikke. Jeg har alligevel lagt penge her. Jeg har ikke lavet crowdfunding i 2000.